So let's do it.
Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pat Callan in here, please.
Yeah, we're going to have a district facility update from Pat and Cord from Studio GC. If you remember, they came over the winter break to do that update, and then Kathy and I had a chance to meet with them a couple weeks ago. So they're going to go ahead and present their findings to us and kind of talk about what they saw.
Awesome. So part of, you should all have a copy of the summary document. I just want to walk through this with you so you understand what this is. So this is the roll-up document to our detail. And it provides a summary building by building and then a summary by district. But what this is essentially is a roll-up of all of the individual pieces for each building. So roofing, exterior tuck pointing, floors, ceilings, electrical systems, etc. In addition, if you recall when we met last, when we presented to the board last, we updated this information over the holidays. So we went through the buildings again, walked the roofs, verified the quantities, ensured that our prediction of where and how long certain building components were projected to last, and the condition that they were in based on our last survey to the updated. We found, for the most part, we were right. We made a couple of minor adjustments. Things lasted perhaps a little bit longer in some cases, and maybe they looked a little worse in other cases. So we made those adjustments based on what we were predicting to be end of life, right? So our job is to give you some prediction as to how much longer a roof is going to last, right? Knowing that we do have in some cases some leaks, in some cases we have things we can visibly observe, some bubbles on the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So we take all those factors into account, not the least of which is when the roof was originally installed and how old it is. So you take all kind of those three components and you put them back together and say, okay, these roofs will last another 5 years, another 3 years, another 2 years. I think in all cases, the adjustments we've made might have varied by about a year. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years based on our projections. So for the most part, they're pretty accurate. And so I'm very happy to report that to you only because we want you to be able to rely on the information we give you. We're not soothsayers, we don't have a crystal ball, we can't predict exactly how long something's gonna last, but we do want you to be somewhat in the ballpark when we're predicting, hey, it's time to replace the roof or it's time to consider this, and you're basing it on accurate information. So, so what you see today is the refreshed version of that data. What we did also, if you recall, there were some questions about surveying teachers and students, and we did that. We got some feedback, which we're going to share with you tonight. And our target was to talk about their environments, right? We want to talk about teaching and learning per se, but how are the spaces supporting teaching and learning? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it too much light? Not enough light? Is the furniture adequate for the types of thing you're trying to do? Where do you like to do your work in your classroom? Those kind of things. So we'll see those results. And I think we had majority participation, I think. Right after break, a few more emails went out, got people back on it, and I think we got on average 200 plus students per building in responses, and I think we had over 90 staff members total give us their responses, so that was really the hope. All right, the next one. So you remember we kind of talked about evaluating the buildings and helping you kind of come to terms with safe, warm, and dry, helping to figure out what those priorities are going to be, and be able to actually also infuse into that educational environment improvements. Okay. So the categories of work, and you'll see in your list an annualized breakout. You'll see these icons kind of added in between the numbers and the descriptions, so you can kind of see which category of work we're projecting in a particular year. But essentially, paving, infrastructure, building envelope, security concerns, any areas we saw security, and that might be either a door not functioning or some sequence that presents a challenge for administering security when someone gets in the building. Like, where do they go? How do they get there? Are they wandering the hallways? Or is there a staff member that's able to observe that? And then the last part was, what about the learning environments should we consider and should we look at? Whether it's just finishes, lighting, furnishings, space flexibility, etc. So again, this is the summary document that you have, or you have the summary of, and you'll see that each one of these pieces goes into a great amount of detail by category as to what we're looking at. We're looking at walls, we're looking at tuck pointing, masonry, portions of the building, how old are they, when was it installed, what's the projected life, what's the anticipated useful life, any modifications or adjustment, which gets us to a projected budget year for that particular line item. All right. Then what we do is we take exact quantities of that item and utilize today's dollars to project a replacement value or a replacement cost for that particular item. Once we do that, we now have a replacement cost. In your summaries, we added 2 more columns over the last time we did this. One was the projected cost summary. In other words, we're taking this value saying, well, it's $180,000 in today's dollars. But if you wait 10 years to do that, it's going to be $465,000. Again, I'm just making that up. But what this projection is, for this particular one, it's projected to be replaced in 2034. So 14 years from now, that $180,000 is projected to cost you $450,000. Construction costs go up every year. Every year there is at least a 3% annual increase in salary rates. If you are an electrician today, a journeyman electrician, you are making over $130,000 a year. So, just to give you some flavor. But why is that important? Because when we talk about this tonight and when we get together for our workshop, we're going to be talking about the projected costs, right? Because there's a cost of waiting. And while we're saying we don't think it'll come due until that date, we know that there's a cost to tell you that, right? Whereas if we say, okay, because we broke the roofs up into various areas because there's different ages. If you do them all this year, right, you're paying today's dollars. If you do one this year and you wait 10 years to do the next one, you're going to pay more than if you did it all at once. Plus, you get a value of kind of order of magnitude, right? You give a bigger contract, they're going to give you a smaller number. So kind of economies of scale. So there's a lot of little kind of bitty pieces in here, but in that summary, we have the replacement cost, and then we give you the difference between what it would cost if you did it in the year it came due, based on all the escalation, and what the replacement cost is, so that difference between the two, so basically today's dollars versus when we're suggesting that would come due, right? Now, it does 2 things for you though. It gives you the ability to see items that you may not want to amortize over a 20-year bond or a 20-year, payment, right? So if you're borrowing money, you don't put cereal in your house on money you take out home equity for, right? You put a pool in, you put a garage in, because that's amortized over time. So we want you to look at it the same way, right? If we're replacing flooring, right, versus a roof, they both have a useful life, but one is $2.50 a square foot, and the other one's $25 a square foot. So how do we look at the value of money over time for you to say, these are things we know we're going to pay a little more for in the future, but we think it's more prudent for us to put money away and save for it, because then we get interest on the money we're putting away, for something that is not as important, or that doesn't, or that is less desirable to put on a 20-year amortized dollar. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So anyway, so the roll-up summary you have is all of this detail kind of rolled up in chunks, and what we organized it by is budget year. So that's why you see the range of years and then the dollar value for each year, and then again, what is projected in the year that it comes due versus what today's dollars are on that difference. Okay? So any questions on that so far? So what our goal would be, so this is kind of a summary of the whole district, so taking all three of those summaries into one. So again, you'll see we have the icons that give you some indication as to what type of work is in these particular years, a description of what that work is. For us, components, again, are we doing something outside the building? Is it something inside the building? Is it a part of the building? Is it a building envelope, et cetera? And then again, the projected annual evaluation of when these particular line items would be targeted to come due. So the interesting part is, if you do it in just the projected dollars, okay, there's about a $2 million difference between the projected dollars and doing it in today's dollars. So if we were looking at saying, well, and again, I'm not forecasting or projecting anything, I'm saying, you know, we're going to go out for a bond, and you just looked at this number alone, well, you wouldn't sell a bond today and then wait till 2026 to do that work, right? You'd say, well, let's pull it forward and save ourselves this money, even though there's interest, et cetera, because sometimes, depending on what your investment strategies are, you can't make as much interest as escalation for construction, right? I mean, there are some tipping points. So this year, I just saw the third quarter of 2019, or fourth quarter of 2019 numbers just came out today. I track this on a quarterly basis. And in the third quarter alone, the escalation for construction was about 3.2% for one quarter. So last year, and again, in our numbers, we're using about 7% because it varies, but last year it was about 5.8%. So not too far off. We'd rather be a little conservative to give you a little cushion. But that says something about what's happening in the marketplace, because that was, there were some items that remained flat, some items that were at the 3.3%. So, you know, when we look at it globally across the nation, it was about 3.5 for the last quarter. So again, there are other areas in the country, construction markets, that are booming. We boomed at the end of last year.
Right.
Corey and I opened bids today. We had 12 roofers bidding 2 small roof projects. So what it tells me is that our market area was saturated last year and has shrunk a little bit, and so these guys are getting scared that there's not enough, you know, that isn't going to perpetuate, you know, there's not going to be enough work moving forward, which actually works to your advantage. But nonetheless, we have to be conservative. We have to protect you from making sure that you have enough resources to do those things. So what I want to talk about in our workshop, because I just don't want, I know you got a long agenda tonight, I don't want to take up too much time, happy to start the conversation tonight, is really kind of dissecting this both vertically and horizontally to understand what is that number that you're comfortable with, right? What is the ability to take, you know, existing resources, if you want to look at a capital savings strategy and do something in 2 years or 5 years? Do you want to look at obtaining bonds to be able to pull some work forward and reduce your overall expenses by getting it done today, and knowing that this board will probably never have to deal with that issue again because that particular item is going to last 20 to 25 years, right? So that is really how we take this information and put it in a way that not only prioritizes the category, but also prioritizes the resource and also looks at the resource over time. Yes?
All right, can I understand, because I guess I was looking at it differently. I was assuming that column 1, where it says current estimated cost, should be less than the next column.
You're accurate. The titles are switched.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so these
Okay.
should be.
Okay, I'm like,
Yeah.
but then I was thinking maybe they're putting it back. Okay, good. All right, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, we pulled this from a pivot table, and Corey and I spent about 3 hours trying to figure out how to make those things work, so I apologize.
Okay,
But
good.
these should be flipped. So these are the projected escalated costs. These are,
What
if you
it
did
is.
everything this year in today's
Okay.
dollars, and then that's the difference by line item. Make sense?
I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
Now, what about the life expectancy of these different things? If you do things too soon, are you cutting off your nose to spite your face? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
By doing things too soon, then you lose it on the other end, as far
Correct.
as longevity.
We agree 100%. But if you look at this summary, we have, let's just take roofs because it's kind of a simple one to understand. We have roofs coming due in about 3 years. We know you're having some challenges and issues now. So then the question you say, well, okay, in 3 years the roof has kind of reached the end of its useful life, it's out of warranty and all those good things. But if we're experiencing problems now, yeah, we're gonna probably lose 3 years of life, but we're gonna save on any expenses you're already to get the roof fixed. So I think that plays into it. I think it plays into understanding, yes, you have a warranty, let's say, on a particular building component, and it has this useful life. But if we're already starting to see wear, because we have to look at it in its aggregate, not looking at, hey, we have this small leak on this flashing and we keep having to repair it. Yes, that's an expense, it's an ongoing issue. But the other thing that we want to make sure we consider, and we talked a little bit about this last time, when we do a roofing replacement, we want the replacement part to be as long from the day you do it, meaning the next time you have to evaluate it, as possible, right? So if we do single-ply membrane roofs and then put a strategy in place to put a coating on it in 25 years,
To give you that extra time you would have lost.
to buy you additional time, right? So so what we're putting down today becomes a 40-year roof instead of a 20 or 25-year roof. And every piece kind of has the ability to be able to have that strategy conversation.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have you do something that's premature. Like for instance, the hardest thing for us to evaluate is all the concrete, right? Because even though it's kind of pocked a little bit or maybe it's cracked, the district's done a good job of using the saw cut method to eliminate tripping hazards, right? And that concrete's still as good as it is, it just looks a little bit off. So is it a cosmetic thing or is it truly a problem, right? So making those assessments, I would argue that those are things we really need to spend some time on, maybe putting together some parameters on how we make an evaluation and bring a recommendation forward before we pull the trigger to start jackhammering concrete to take it out. Paving, that's another one that we think is really important. When you do paving, we want to ensure that that paving has the long-term maintenance plan. So if you seal coat every 3 to 5 years, a playground, you will extend the life of that asphalt by 15 years. It has a 15-year life to start with. So now you're getting a product that, if you did nothing to it, should last 15 years. If you maintain it, you'll get another 15 out of it, right? And again, seal coating is pennies a square foot that you do annually, right? Or when you do it. So there are some things that we want to make sure that we're looking at these things, not just on what does it cost to replace it, but what does it cost to replace it so that the district's expenses are less or you get greater value over time. Does that make sense?
Plus, a lot of these things wouldn't you say that like replacing these things is going to get rid of some of the maintenance that is being spent
Yeah.
to do all that? Plus some of the stuff like, like windows and things like that, they become more efficient
Correct.
as time goes on. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Flooring, obviously, flooring is an issue that we talk about a lot now. VCT, easy, it's cheap material, you gotta strip it every year. Actually, I had this very conversation yesterday with a client, and he said, I'm really frustrated with VCT, which is everywhere. And he said the LVT tiles or the VET tiles, which are today's version of the old VCT, they're easier to maintain, they don't require as much wax, they don't have to strip them all the time. So you're doing all this extra maintenance on this floor product. So if we're gonna do a replacement for carpeting or something else, we would wanna know, okay, well, the cost of replacing is X, but what is the maintenance of that product and how long is that product extended to last? Because if we can reduce your maintenance costs, right, your ongoing cost of ownership, if you will, and put in a product that's comparable in price, that's a better improvement than just simply
Just replacing.
replacing it,
Right.
one for one. No, that's good. So this is all projects over time, correct, Corey?
Yes.
So again, this just gives you the same chart, but kind of, you see that where the spikes are.
What was the $6 million project?
That is the combined of all the projects back down in 2029.
Okay, okay.
So this gives you kind of a snapshot of where, if you just kind of plotted along and had a budget for, you can see these things are really challenging to budget for, right? Where do you come up with $6 million in 1 year? You got to almost kind of take all these down and balance them all out and figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, so in 2006, when the state kind of turned off and funding started actually going south, people say, oh, it was the recession in 2008, 2009. No, it was 2006. The state started to stop funding of capital projects, construction grants went by the wayside, all these things happened. Well, I kind of forgot that there's this incredible inventory you have of your facilities. It would be as if you decided to move into your house and not do anything to it for 20 years, just nothing. You know, you can't do that, it's not gonna last. And so some of these things you guys have done a good job with doing, but they're just now coming due. So being able to understand what the 6 million represents, how much of this is cosmetic, or maybe things that have a lower priority, how much of these things are critical infrastructure that have high priority. And is it beneficial to wait, to Nancy's point, is there still life in this, but if we pull it forward, can we actually buy ourselves the extended warranty, if you will? Yes.
Okay, like in 23, that's when the roofs are due, and that's like huge.
Yep.
Could we, and 21 and 22, there's not a lot there. So can we just pull some stuff out of
Sure.
23 into 21 and 22, so we don't have this exorbitant cost in 23? I mean, we can hedge our bets a little bit. So that's such a big hit.
That's correct, yeah.
So there's really 3 strategies. One is to establish a minimum annual investment in capital. Right, so that's strategy 1. That's a limiting strategy because it has to come from existing tax revenue, or it's got to come from fund balances, if you will. So you're going to spend down a fund balance to a certain point. And that is a way then to kind of recalibrate what we're saying is wait till it becomes due and do it. It's let's do it more in increments. The challenge with roofs is where do you stop? Right, we got a big roof. Yes, there are some natural breaks in the roof, but maybe is it a third of the roof? Is it half the roof? Is it 3/4 of the roof? Is it the additions in the original building? Do we split it that way? So it may not be that we can take, $4 million and blend it over 8 years and it's, $2 million a year,
Yeah.
right? That kind of thing. It's a little more challenging to be able to adjust those.
And what kind of shape are our roofs in?
They're
Oh, is this not the time to ask? Should I ask that later?
No, you can ask it now.
they're in decent shape, but like Pat said, there are the areas that are leaking. It's coming due.
Let's do.
So it's not.
It's getting worn.
Let's do.
Now, at one time, the connection between this part and that part, that was an issue, am I right? Did we have some issues there?
Yes.
How is
New to
that
old.
holding up? And that goes back how many years already?
Yeah, new to old, yeah, well, it's old.
So how is that?
New to old needs to be,
So this whole roof needs to be done, the whole thing?
right, but the other
Oh, so
roof
sorry.
is older.
Right, yeah, I know.
So
yeah.
it gets into this question is, if you want to break this down into smaller chunks, where do you start and stop? Right?
Oh, when I was saying break it down into smaller chunks, I was talking about other projects rather than the roofs, and save the roofs for 23. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So break
So pull some
these-
stuff out of
Sure.
there.
I see, so make this smaller.
Yeah.
So the 23 is
Yeah,
the
sure,
roof.
sure.
Or maybe we could cover then the roofs
Sure.
and because didn't you say last time too, that if we budgeted, and not budgeted, but we contracted, all 3,
You could do it.
we definitely, no, but I mean, the price would definitely go down
That had been my
significantly.
question,
Yeah,
if we did
I
it
knew
all
one
at
of us,
once.
I know,
Well, and I just wonder about, I know you said this is possible, but like piecemealing, fixing the roof.
Well, yeah, so, well,
It
Is that an issue if you patch one area and then that area is good, does then the damage get larger in another spot because this spot is functioning well, I don't know, I'm not
Yeah.
a roofer, so.
You know, I think in some cases, if the roofs are all the same age, but some are perhaps responding better to maintenance than other areas due to slope or existing conditions, whatever the reason is. By taking care of the more challenging areas, yes, you get a watertight fit. But that means that this roof is getting older, so that the increase in, or frequency of the
Maintenance.
leaks is gonna start building faster and start happening. So then it's like, well, geez, we just did this. And then you do the next roof. Well, if you had the roofer do both roofs, you would absolutely save money. If you had the roofer do all 3 buildings, you would absolutely save money.
So that's the question, is how old are each of these roofs, right?
Right.
They're all coming,
different.
they're all
Different sections
installed.
are different, are older than.
Yeah.
So what are
This is
the age of the
newer
roofs on
section
average?
here. Part of it,
15,
on
20
each of the
years
other schools,
average,
it's
because
part.
the
that are
new
newer.
additions
With the,
were put
with the
on in
additions.
2003. So right now you're 17.
So you're 17 years old on the addition roofs.
Right.
And you're 20 plus on your existing roofs. And the roofs, on average, last about 20 to 25 years. So we're kind of at end of life, or close to end of life.
Right.
So that, but that's the kind of the decision making, or the, I won't say decision making, but prioritization of it, right? I got a 17-year-old roof and I have a 20-year-old roof, right? Does it make sense to replace them both?
Yeah.
Probably. And part of the reason is, we would like you to be able to walk away from this exercise having a strategy in place, but knowing that you don't have to really think about that again and make that major expenditure again in your tenure. But more importantly, you're also setting up future boards for success, because now they don't have to think about financing it or budgeting for it, et cetera. Right? That's really
Plus too, I'm
cool.
curious how the, the recoding of it and the warranty and all that works if you do it part by part.
Yeah.
I don't, and again, I don't understand all
It just, it
the,
just
would
makes
be.
it more complicated.
yeah.
I would just think if you've got one guy ripping off everything and checking it all out, you're gonna, all these issues that you've got, you know what I mean, are able to say, this is where we've had problems, this is where we've had problems. Can they fix it all, as opposed to it's this spot and this one, and then we gotta worry about something else somewhere else.
Or do you say, doing all 3 roofs at once is kind of a lot in the summer,
That's what I
right?
was
Yeah.
gonna say, is just break it up and do building.
Well,
Yeah.
or do we issue a bid package that has a 3-phase project?
Well,
You
I
still
was
give
gonna
it to
ask
one
that.
vendor.
Yeah, that's what I was
You give it to
thinking.
one vendor, they do this roof this year, this roof next year, this roof next year,
They have guaranteed
But
work.
they give you a quote.
and they have a
and-
guaranteed price.
Price.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I was gonna ask
So
about
that could break it down by year as opposed to putting it all in 2023, depending on what building had the biggest urgency, and obviously people in the buildings, and you guys would know. I
Yes,
mean,
exactly, yeah. And we could help you prioritize that. The benefit to that is, if you do look at some type of financing vehicle, that's a fixed cost. We know what we know what
You're
the value
locking
is.
them in.
We know what that is ahead of time. So, yeah, all of those kind of discussions, and I'll probably be like a crazy man on this little smart board, trying to, diagram it for us, so that in the end, we can come up with a plan that is derivative of the assessment, that gives you some way to look forward and have an achievable end. Okay. So, we had some fun with the survey, I have to say. So we issued surveys to the students, and we issued surveys to the teachers. The surveys we issued to the students, and we kind of did this by question, so you can kind of see. So the question was, what is your favorite place to work in your classroom? The size of these circles reflect the responses we got, right? So the more responses. But I really like the flexible seating because it helps me relax when I'm stressed. So what does that tell me about a student? That means that they have a choice in their classroom to go where they're most comfortable, not necessarily to do the work, but how they feel that day, right? This kind of social emotional tag that it's necessary someday to sit by the window. I need a little sunlight. Or I want to be a little more reclusive, I want to be by myself, maybe somewhere else in the classroom. A lot of them like the reading corner, like sitting on the floor, probably not unusual because they probably do that at home, right? A lot of them like their desks, right? Some next to the windows, but I think because these classrooms have such big windows in most cases, there's light everywhere. right? So you don't necessarily have to sit right next to the window to get some natural light. The back table, and again, the common response was we really like the flexible seating we already have in our classroom.
Was that a multiple choice, or Philip, like they came up with their options, or?
That was coming up with their own options.
Yeah, we gave them a kind of
And there
a,
were 10.
this was like a Google survey, so they were able to go on and just, type it all in, and then we collated all the information. Did the same thing for the teachers too.
We were talking about that.
But like those weren't the
today.
options given,
No,
they typed
no.
in their favorite spot?
They gave us their spot and we categorized what they
Oh,
said.
you can't, I was gonna say, I don't know kids who say flexible seating. Can I go sit in the flexible area? I mean, you categorize, like if they said beanbag or whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, like if somebody said we sit in the, bouncy chair, or we sit over here, we categorize that as some flexible area in the room. But what that's telling us is the students are responding to their learning environment by saying, hey, look, we have enough choices to help us stay focused and on task in the places we choose to sit. And again, we pulled this out because we gave them a spot to write their answers. And it's interesting that you have a student talking about when I feel stressed. Right?
Do all 2nd through 5th grade classrooms at Mon have choice and flexible seating?
No.
We were talking earlier, Tiffany, we were doing the finance committee thing, and we were talking about that, and Fran and Carol Katz was here. And some teachers have just created their own atmosphere within the room, and it varies from room to room. And we were talking about making sure we do something about this, because you were talking about it, and I remember you talking about it, we did
Some
discuss
still
it with
definitely take
them.
the more traditional approach.
Right, but a combination thereof, so, I was glad to see that was on there.
So studies that have been done show that this is productive?
It's the new thing.
Well, so studies that have been done, and I just actually was at a learning conference back in October, and there was about 4 or 5 sessions as well as kind of a panel discussion about flexibility in the classrooms. And what was most interesting was the designers and the educators were kind of standing back and observing. So they had 2 different, they had a high school district and then they had an elementary district. And all they did all day was took a video camera, and just watched how the students moved about the building and how they worked. And it was uncanny that the spaces that as architects we think we design, oh, this is perfect, right? It's got the right proportion, it's got the right scale. Isn't necessarily the space that the kids gravitated towards, right? They gravitated towards what they were most comfortable with. And on any given day, you all make different choices. Sometimes you sit at your couch, sometimes you sit at your kitchen table, sometimes you sit in a room by yourself
Upstairs,
reading a book,
downstairs,
on your bed, etc. But I think the most interesting part for me, that takeaway from that whole experience, was that to predict it is the mistake. So we want it truly to be flexible, because we want the kids to be able to make a choice, because on any given day, there's another driving factor that perhaps they can't verbalize, they can't discuss with you, they can't materialize, they had a bad night's sleep, something happened in their family, their parents got into a fight, whatever that is, that's making them stressed out. But if they can come in and find something that makes them comfortable, we want to give them lots of choices. Choice and control over their environments. So we asked them specifically about their environment as it relates to the things that we're studying, right? We're talking about safety, temperature, talking about how does it impact them, right? So we talked about safety, and what's really, really great is 79% of the students feel safe in their classrooms. Now you say, well, why isn't it 100%? It's never going to be 100%. And there's reasons why that is. And it has really very little to do with what you can do to make them feel safe, but a fair amount said they didn't know, and maybe they never thought about it, right? So if you take the yes and you add the I don't know, and then you have folks sometimes, and maybe it's they heard a news report about a shooting on their way to school, right? Or somebody was talking about something that happened in a building, or maybe somebody got in a car accident and they're associating that with something that happened in school. But I think this is actually very, very good, because we have actually done surveys where this is less than 50%. Now you got a problem. if the students don't feel comfortable and safe in their classroom environments. And then we talked about temperature, right? And we talked about this in the context of, does it impact your ability to focus? You know, can you focus on your coursework, or does the temperature of your room bother you? So, folks said sometimes, some students said sometimes, and then not affect at all, right? But that's a pretty significant number of folks or students that said that it really doesn't have a big impact on them, right? And then, Corey, this is,
Yeah, so if, based on a baseline of, are you too cold or are you too hot?
right, so you have a range, and we gave them like a timeline, and they had to kind of pick along the timeline of where they felt. So if they were in the middle, they were comfortable, hot or cold. Generally, the rooms tend, in their opinion, to be a little cooler, colder, which isn't so bad. It's when this number is at the extreme edge that we start seeing differences in how they perceive their space. So this is actually pretty good. That means the rooms are being managed temperature-wise to kind of satisfy the students, and it doesn't seem to have an impact, an adverse impact on their ability to do their task work during the day.
Did you have a survey on the teachers on that one?
These are the teachers.
These were the students.
Yeah, this was the
We
last,
got-
so these were the, and we only asked them 5 questions because we didn't want to, just to give too much.
Were the Ridge Central students asked only about this, and the lawn ones asked only about
We
the
do have
classroom environment?
results for every single question that we have for each school.
Each school.
So,
Okay.
Some respond, but the number of respondents by school varied. So we took the highest number of respondents by question, and we're happy to share all this information with you. You know, we'll give you the access to the detail and be able to put it in this format for each building.
sure.
So then at Finley, this is the teachers' responses to this. So we first asked them about sunlight, right? Because sunlight has a kind of a twofold effect. Too much of it, I need blinds. Put a shade up, it's too much, too bright, right? Or, you know, I don't have enough because I can't see. And so we define that kind of like sunlight. You know, do you appreciate having sunlight in your classroom? Do you have enough of it? And then the other is glare, because glare is usually why you put a shade down or you put a screen down. So the way we structured this was by teacher, by classroom, all right? And the response really was yes or no, okay? So, do you have enough sunlight in your classroom? Ms. Walsh absolutely has enough sunlight in her classroom. And she's very proud of that. But we have, is it Neiman? Doesn't feel she has enough, and Bont doesn't feel she has enough. So they were able to put a yes or no and kind of put it on the same timeline. Is it low or is it high, right? And so that's what this represents. Now, they may be in interior classrooms and not have any windows at all, right? Or they may not have any borrowed light. So what this tells us is are there things we can do as we kind of look at these buildings as a whole to improve that perception of their space? You know, maybe those are the ones that get the LED light fixtures, right? So if we're talking about prioritizing and making some internal changes, maybe we say, you know, maybe we don't just blanket LED lights in the whole building. Maybe we target the interior spaces for LED lights to match the circadian rhythm for windowless classrooms. And that's kind of threshold number 1. And then we'll eventually get to the rest of the building, right? Because classrooms that have windows ready. I'm just saying it's just a strategy. I'm not proposing you do that. And then here, you know, does the sunlight make it hard due to glare? And Miss Walsh loves her sun, has a lot of sun, but glare seems to be a challenge in her classroom. Not sure exactly how that relates, but at least now we have some data to go back and start asking some questions and probing a little bit to see if there's a way we might be able to resolve that. But we like to see that glare isn't an issue, because we find that glare, as the teachers view it, is probably more about their perception of students than their perception of glare onto themselves. Whereas the kids don't necessarily see it that way. So they would look at this and say, well, the kids move around the room in a way to kind of get away from the glare, and the glare would make my room more usable. So again, it gives us the ability to kind of probe a little more into those questions. So then at lawn, we asked the same questions about air, light, temperature, and sound. So we've introduced sound as a component. Is the classroom too lively, right? Is it too bouncy? Is there a lot of reflection, or is it hard to hear when students' voices go up, or the teacher can't overcome, and some of the kids can't hear the teacher in the back of the room? So, but for the most part, it looks like we have pretty high levels of satisfaction in all those areas, with a couple of, outliers, and again, based on probably where they are in the building and the type of room that they have. But we consider anything over 80% good. So we're a little low on sound, and we'd like to drill into that a little more and find out, is it classroom administration? Is it that the room has too many hard surfaces and we can't, no matter what the teacher does, she can't get the sound level down, and we maybe need to look at adding some sound soak panels and some other techniques? Do we need to do what 128 did and maybe get teachers a centralized mic that allows her voice to be heard anywhere in the classroom, no matter where she's standing, with a microphone? I'm not suggesting that's the right answer. I'm saying there are options out there. We need to understand what the issue is so we can present some options for consideration to see if there's any way we can solve it. Are you familiar with what 128 did? Anyone? So there's a centralized speaker in the middle of the classroom. The teacher wears a mic just like they do on TV on Saturday mornings, right? And no matter which direction she's facing, she's talking at the board, if she's speaking to a student, her voice comes out equal throughout the entire classroom.
Because it
Kids
comes out
turn it
there.
off,
Yeah.
or bathroom.
Or private or even if you have a private conversation.
Well, right.
You just gotta turn it off.
You gotta turn it off, right. What we did, but what I'll tell you, because we did a survey for Merrill there and asked them the opposite question: how do you like the system? And a lot of them have said that they really like it because it saves their voice.
I've been here.
They don't have to push their voice up. A couple said it does make it challenging because I almost always have to wear it, and when I want to have a one-on-one conversation, I have to remember to turn it off. So all those things exist. There's no one panacea, one right answer.
It exists a lot now with kids who have hearing devices because,
Yeah.
I have students
To
now
an
wearing a
individual.
microphone.
Well, but that goes individually, where this one goes, it amplifies.
But I think
the
she's
whole-
meaning that the teachers aren't used to having
Some
that
of them
mic.
are
A
used
lot
to
of
it, but
teachers,
again, the
yeah.
idea of turning it off and on is.
But you get used to it.
Just like anything.
Most of our primary teachers at my building use that.
Do they like them?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little, again, I haven't experienced it. It seems like I'm, like the three rooms that I observed, it almost was like I was at the Hawks game. Because everything was like over the loudspeaker. It sounded like, but maybe
But
it is
it's more
used to it.
natural, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily loud
Yeah.
speaker-ish. It doesn't sound like you're in a
Yeah.
microphone performing. It's just a little,
I'm not sure, but I think they have the capabilities of doing it through the projection TVs or projectors.
Oh.
I think it's a separate,
I think it can
Separate type
be,
of speaker.
I think it can actually be wired into.
So
it.
you're familiar with the ones that have a centralized speaker? Yeah. Yeah. So.
Tiffany, do you have one in your classroom or no?
I'm so loud, I know. Nobody
That's
wants
how
to hear me.
I would have too. I was always on.
Yeah.
Shut up, Liz.
Well, teachers have a tough job, right? I mean, you're on stage for 6 hours a day, every day, right? And you gotta be, and it is a little easier when your voice is a little easier for
Yeah.
the kids to hear.
Or if you're
from.
not naturally just loud.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, people hear me laughing, doors down.
They know where you're at.
Yes.
And Pat, as you
And
said,
I'm having fun.
I
I was
really
the
think
same
the
way.
key for all of this is when we see this data drilling down to why.
Yeah.
Like that first one you showed with lawn, we had almost half the kids said desks and half of them said flexible seating.
Yeah.
Or are they saying desks because that's their only option? So really drilling into this data now that we have it.
Right, and now that we have this, can you go back one?
Yeah.
But now that we have this specific data, so we have sound meters, we have light meters, and we also have humidity, CO2, it's a combo humidity, CO2, and temperature sensor that we can put in these classrooms that are having these challenges to actually then get data to help us understand what the problem is, to be able to solve it. Because sometimes you know, especially when it comes to temperature, a lot of it is perception. Everybody has a different thermostat in their bodies, right? Some people like it warmer, some people like it colder. You know, sound, we don't usually see that because sound is usually sound, right? If it's a problem for everybody. Air satisfaction, some people are, you know, perhaps it's warm or it seems stuffy, so they're immediately saying, oh, it's too stuffy in here, therefore, you know, it must be. Well, the CO2 sensor tells us how stuffy a room really is. And if it is stuffy, well, at least we now know that we can fix a problem and make some adjustments to the mechanical system. So we'll continue to drill into this as we move forward to get more data. Again, we just want to make sure that in the end, we make it right and it gets fixed, right? In the best possible way for everyone. So the last slide are the topics that are, you know, we talked a little bit about these, but these are the ones that we need to understand how we prioritize, right? Like, for instance, you know, fire alarm control panels at all the buildings. That's a pretty perfunctory thing. You know, it's required by code. We have to have an annunciator panel. Your systems are a little older. They still meet code. Fire departments would like them changed out. How do we bridge that, right? Are they functioning? If the answer is yes, okay, then are they not functioning properly? Do they give us all the warnings that we need? Do they notify the fire? So we have to go through this protocol to say, how high of a priority is this if we truly are not in jeopardy of jeopardizing any safety of a building?
Okay, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sure.
On probably, at least the first two, isn't that part of the life safety? When they come in and check out our school, the life safety program, when they come in?
It is.
Assess the school from South Cook?
Well, we also do this, so this is also part of the
Yeah.
audit, yes. So this part is, fire departments like new stuff. Now, it's not a knock on them, but they like the stuff to be the current code, right? It's gotta be today's code. But the older systems, you know, when the fire alarm goes off, the fire department's notified, they come, they can look at the control panel. Well, the new control panels tell them exactly which device went off. Well, your buildings aren't that big, right? So if the device goes off, it goes off in one area or the other. How important is it for them to be able to pinpoint exactly where in the building it went off?
What kind of shape are ours in? Are ours still?
They're functioning, but they are getting to the end of life,
Of
meaning
life.
they're no longer expandable. There has been some devices that have gone bad.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So they're due?
Not the newer section, but all the older sections,
Right.
yes. And they're not compatible. It's a long story and we'll get into it eventually.
But they're not
because we're looking.
Right.
But if the panel goes, they do not have replacements, they don't make
Right.
them.
Is it something our fire department could write a grant for?
Well, we are actually looking in our grant to see if we can cover a big chunk of that cost.
That maintenance
Maybe a
grant,
partnership with some sort.
well, because that maintenance grant that came out, and it's $100,000 grant, and we would have to pay half of it, so we could stand to get
But that's,
$50,000.
It's a lot of money.
We kind of earmarked, this
That, and
could
then
be,
our dwarfing situation we were talking about too, that's next, right, the security thing?
Right. So the two level access, right? So you get your buzz in the first door, buzz in the second door, so that you're never at a location in a building where you're not at a secure point before being released, after being verified and checked that you are who you say you are, and that you need to be in the building. Right? So again, this is just something that we think is important, but we have to talk about it because there's a cost to all these things, right? And then obviously this is extremely important, right? And you know, we looked at functional classrooms, you know, replacements,
Replacing the maintenance, the additional classroom in the garage.
Yes, right. Are additional classrooms needed? How many? If that classroom is constructed, what impact does that have on the other areas of buildings? Is there any other areas of buildings that need to be retrofitted or modified? And then, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no, I'm interrupting you.
Sure.
Because we were talking about this earlier, that's why it's part of my mind. Now, we've already pretty much maxed out everything as far as, you know, we can't reduce space anymore.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about that, and we can't split any more rooms in half, or even if it's just for studying or testing or whatever. So, what are our options gonna be now to, if we get more kids?
Well, I think as
I
we-
have one idea.
As we talked, you know, the demographics and the projections as to where you think you're gonna be in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
We're gonna wanna test that model. We're gonna wanna look at the buildings and test, because it's not just that you get more kids, it's, you get more kids, they need a homeroom, okay, if you will. But then are there additional itinerants that are required? So do our itinerants numbers go up? Does their support numbers go up? So where do we put those people?
Okay, exactly,
Right?
yeah.
So we would want to be able to look at where the projections are going and then test each building, right? To make sure that we can make an assessment and say, this building's going to be short 2 classrooms and 2 support spaces. Well, we're not necessarily going to be able to tell you how we're going to fix that. That's a conversation that we do together, but at least you know what you're facing, right? Because if by doing this, it solves a current need, but this kind of maxes out the number of academic spaces that you have in your building,
Right.
minus the final frontier, which is kicking Wes out and kicking them out of the garage, which is also something you need. So how do you balance both of those two? Those things?
I brought up earlier, is there a way to use the census that's gonna be done this year to kind of project out as to what our needs might be? Does that
How
help at
long
all?
does census data take to be?
You know, that's a good
process?
question. Usually it takes about a year
Yeah, they take
before
forever.
you actually see the actual data. But I think your cohort analysis would probably give you the best.
Oh, we have a cohort?
Well, what I was
What is
talking about
that?
so it's really being able to see, projected out, starting as early as pre-K with in kindergarten,
Oh,
get solid
I know
numbers
what you're
and
talking about,
projecting
yeah.
that out all the way through. And you do have to make some estimates of who's gonna be coming through.
Mid-cycles?
But yeah, you'll be able to see who leaves in 8th grade versus who's coming up and projecting what numbers.
Okay.
And depending on where they live, what the buildings would look like.
And what the cohort does is to me, the biggest benefit of the cohort is it shows you where your bubbles are, right? Because if you have a kind of a large class size that moves through the building, what impact does that have, not only on the elementary building, but also on the middle school when they finally get here, to be able to see that kind of in that class and that class size and its life cycle? Because you probably, I mean, from what I remember, and maybe things have changed, you don't really see a lot of kids leaving. I mean, once they get to you, there really isn't, is there a lot of changeover? Do you have a lot of
There
mobility?
has been, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And is it by building or is it district-wide?
We see most of it at
Lawn.
Lawn, and then from that area also at Finley, but we're at a 10% mobility rate, and we're seeing.
Where is Central at, mobility-wise? Do you know?
You guys are at, I think, like, I want to say like 6 to 8, somewhere in there, but it is
With
lower.
increasing more than
Yeah,
half.
we are seeing,
Yeah.
But with the move-outs come move-ins.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, we've been
Okay,
very.
so
We're
it's
one
not
for
as
one.
simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Usually it's a 1-for-1. so-
Yeah.
So
We're
when I
not
s-
losing, I
okay.
mean, we are down this year from last year, but we're not losing a lot, no.
And it tends to recycle itself back up.
So one thing I can tell you though, when we start talking about classroom environments and we look at, you know, making your classrooms more efficient, we look at 2 things. How much fixed furniture, desks, chairs, etc., are in those classrooms versus the newer style of furniture, which is smaller, lighter weight, can be on wheels and moved around, you know, to create actually more space in the classroom. Do you have a lot of casework?
Bless you.
You know, that's a very, bless you, a very efficient way to store, inefficient way to store things. Are there things we can do to improve stores so we get things off the floor? And the biggest thing obviously is the in-classroom libraries, because, you know, that's a lot of books to have in the classrooms on shelves that's taking up floor space for kids. Because the one thing to solve space issues is, usually the first thing we look at is demographics, project what we need, and then you start with class size. Right? I'm not saying that's a happy thought or anything you really want to do, but you look at class size to say, can we solve this problem by increasing 1 student per grade level? Generally speaking, it's been my experience, you can't do that, because it doesn't solve the problem. Because it's never that simple. Just, oh, we'll just put more butts and seats and we'll get in the classrooms and then we can solve the problem. It's not that simple. So then how do we apply your overages to the building and say, okay, let's look at the cohort with the projected additional students through this building over its life cycle. How will we fare with academic space and how we fare with supports? So that you have kind of a built-in model now that we've done the assessments and have all of the square footage on all the classrooms and all the support spaces identified. We can test the building to see when it'll be a problem. Because one of the other things is when you look at the demographic data, and then you start looking at that over time with the cohorts, it may be a problem you need to plan for in 5 years, not necessarily a problem you're going to see today. So we're going to be able to, again, give you all this information to help us put a plan together that predicts as much as we can, knowing what we know today, knowing that we're not going to be able to predict everything, but we're going to get awful close, right? You're not going to have any big surprises, like, oh, we have a $4 million roof or $4 million worth of roof we're going to do next year. Well, that's a problem. So that's really the plan. I know it's a lot of moving parts, but that's part of the reason why when I suggested to Adam that doing it on a workshop where we can kind of roll up our sleeves and get into some detail in all these given areas where we can really bring the data to help have the conversation. And then once we walk away and understand some of the board's priorities, we can take those priorities, apply them, and come up with a couple of different models, a couple of different tests, not just of how you use the building, but the plan. How do we pay for all this? What does this look like over time? When does it need to happen?
So what Pat had suggested, what I thought was a really good idea, is to have a workshop on a Saturday morning where both Pat comes in, and we do talk about the moving parts. We have Studio GC, which we're trying to look at the facilities, but we also have the finance piece. And to bring Tammy back from PMA, who came to speak with us a couple months ago now about our financing options, and have us all together to really hammer this through, because obviously it's something that's kind of been just sitting there that we really need to be on top of, but we need to, at that point, get some of this work done. So I'm going to be emailing some possible dates that we can pick to choose from. You'll get that from me tomorrow morning, and then I've already checked with Pat and Tammy to make sure that they're both available on those dates that I'd be sending out. And then whoever's available, the most people on that Saturday, that's when we'll be doing it.
And we would do it in, probably a 2-hour window, maybe 2.5 hours tops. Not trying to burn you out in one day. And then if we need to do another one, or we bring it back to a study session, we can do it at a study session. But that's just a good way for us to kind of immerse and get kind of connected to the data. So you'll get a little more understanding as to what we're seeing, for then us to help you build a plan that makes some sense, that has the financial component, which we can't really turn a blind eye to. We really have to understand what are the district resources and what.
And when does our decision have to be made about the referendum, if and when, if
I
or?
believe that was
On the referendum.
August? August.
We have to,
Yeah.
we have to make it by, oh, I thought it was
To
soon,
do
so
November,
okay.
yes. we have to-
That was soon.
Can I ask a question, and this might be
Sure.
something that happens in this breakout session with everything. I feel like we totally glazed over the security aspect, and that was like a pressing issue that we had looked at the front doors. Now, in my first visit with the board, I think it was like you were here talking about like these glass spaces you're going to create. And you talked about changing the structure, the front of Ridge Central.
Yep.
Is that part of something that you guys are still, I don't know what the plans are, because right now I feel that the front is not secure.
Yeah. So that change to the front was part of a security change to also allow for some additional spaces to be created for a staff lounge, and then to move some staff
Yeah,
members around.
I remember that.
But it created a more safe environment than exists today. So we didn't want, normally at public meetings, we try not to bring floor plans if we can, because we don't know if the press is gonna be here, and we don't want your floor plans floating around. So a workshop session, we'll bring paper.
That's what I
And we'll
wanted,
have a
yeah.
conversation about what is the level of security each building? How is it, how does this work, and could it be improved? So
Okay.
yes, that is gonna be part of
That's
our-
when that would be
Yeah,
talked about, okay,
that'll be part of the
great.
conversation, for sure. Yeah.
And that workshop would not be videotaped and posted?
At least not the security part, for sure. Yeah, that
I would
we
just
have-
recommend you
we
not
would have to go to
talk about
closed for
that.
the security reasons, yes.
I had one district that, two board members refused to go into executive session and started talking about it, and they exposed their entire security plan to the public at a public meeting.
You can't, no.
I mean, I almost wanted to stop talking, but I couldn't do that. Yeah, so I would highly recommend we just
Yeah.
do that.
That's fine.
Any other questions for Pat or Corey tonight?
No, I asked them,
I
No,
know,
thank you.
I know this was a lot of information, and again, our goal was to give you kind of a high-level view of it, so you can start thinking about it, so when we do get together, we can drill into any area, and we will have access to everything. So if we decide we want to make a left-hand turn and go down another road and start talking about something else, we're gonna have all of your buildings, all the floor plans, all the detail with us, and we can go anywhere you need to go to talk about
You might need a bigger table.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, like, I know we talk about how we're so landlocked and all the other type of stuff. Is there any, like, thought that you have of how to expand up, out, anywhere?
You know, going up is always discussed. It's a little more expensive, and I did a school in Schaumburg back in like 1998, and we took a one-story building and made it a two-story building. So it happens. It wasn't inexpensive, but it happens. But I do think that, you know, when you look at each building, you really don't have, I mean, unless you want to take up play space. Lawn is really the only school you have where we have enough room to go. I mean, even with the well field that's there, where we have enough room to actually provide some level of expansion for academic spaces. Whereas Central and Findlay, you know, I don't know that you could sacrifice any more play area with the number of kids that are out there. And really here, you say, well, what about right here, this green space? Well, that's a detention basin.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I asked.
So could we build over the answer is yes, but we'd have to put about $750,000 of, or not maybe $750,000, but probably $250,000 to $500,000 of infrastructure underground to be able to build on top. And that's for stormwater retention.
I have one
But
more.
that green space could be reallocated for a play space.
Could be, yeah, could be.
Would it be feasible if the elementary, well, it wouldn't help Finley, but if we added classrooms and made lawn bigger, and if you had too many kids at Central, they could go over there, and then of course, you know, if that happened, if we needed more space, could we do that?
You mean in terms of boundaries, moving kids back and forth?
Well, we would
have to
well, we
change
would
the
have to,
boundaries.
you know.
Yeah,
But what if, I know we talked
It
about
wouldn't help
it being
Finley, but you.
administration here, what if that moved over to there?
But that wouldn't give us, that wouldn't help Central, but only help Finley.
You could put a link in between these two buildings and isolate
Yeah.
Finley off.
I mean,
Both
when I was
schools,
little, the
both
boundaries
schools
were
would need
different.
the expansion, so, you know.
Yeah,
my
and
brother
they're-
went to
I
lawn.
think they're written as being at the discretion of the district, the boundaries
Boundaries
between
are
boundaries.
always-
Yeah,
Yes.
if we had to do
I live at
that.
109th and Mayfield, and when my brother was, he's 10 years old now, and he went to Ridge Lawn, and when I was in grammar school, people on Menard went to Ridge, I mean, like,
Yeah.
the boundaries are much different,
Well, there was
so-
another school though too.
And they went to a
For the village hall. It was a third
storefront.
Ridge was over there, yeah, there
Yeah.
was another school.
Well, that's why it's
When I
I'm
first
talking about when
moved
I
to
was,
Cloud
little,
Ridge,
it
it was
wasn't when my
school.
brother
Yeah.
went, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's why it's
I think it was
important to look,
closer.
as Pat said, the cohorts
like,
and to
we
really
go to
see
all
what
these-
we can project out. And you can't project every family
No.
that's gonna move in or out, but you
Yeah.
can get a good sense of.
Or what if you created both of these schools that are sitting here to be K through 5 and all of Finley moves to Central? And that becomes, then you have all young students in this campus, whatever you wanna call it, and you move over to Finley and that's where you expand. Because I know Finley's been overcrowded as the people go over there and you have a different kind of
Finley or Lawn?
rotation.
What do you
You're
think?
talking about
Taking lawn and making that the junior high school and moving
That's
both of
been
your,
discussed before.
and moving both of your grade schools here in one campus.
And then connecting the two buildings and you can actually add more space.
Mhm. Connecting the two
Yeah,
buildings.
and like I said, I think really the important thing is, ideas like that is to just really think every
Yeah.
single thing through, and when you
There'd
talk
be a lot of
busing
renovation
and.
involved.
Yeah, testing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Testing the model,
So,
right.
but
Yeah,
there's-
a lot of renovations.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure, thanks so much.
And like I said,
Thank you,
I
Pat.
will email you out, but, and this will come tomorrow morning, but the two dates we are looking at are Saturday, February 29th, or Saturday, March 14th. So I will email that out first thing tomorrow. February 14th is Pi Day, so we.
And my birthday, so
Oh, I was gonna say,
I
everybody
love
was
that.
going on.
We can get cake though, Mary. Big Costco cake.
Oh, Lori would be thrilled to
All right.
buy cake for birthday.
I have no preference.
Yeah, I know.
And like I said, I'll email you. and-
I'm not emailing you.
Our
I
pleasure,
think
our
that's
pleasure,
it.
yeah, it's great.
I just have to give enough time.
Oh, and.
What time
Oh, I
was it?
forgot to tell you. So at the workshop, well, you guys didn't win the big Legos.
Oh, yeah, we thought we were gonna get
Well,
the
hang on a
big
second,
one.
hang on a second. So, do you remember the green Lego boards?
Yeah.
So we are gonna donate a big green Lego board with Legos.
So if you want to see it, you can come play with it in my office.
It'll be in my son's room.
Wes, thank you.
Legos.
They'll come here Monday through Friday.
It was amazing how many parents brought their kids by and allowed us to babysit for a while. I think that's the show.
Oh, God.
Actually, it was a blast. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you for staying, Wes.
It was a
Thank
Thank you guys.
So what time are you talking on this,
Thank you
Sarah?
very
It would
much.
Our pleasure.
probably be like
6
8 or 8:30.
Okay, all right, because I just have to talk
We would
about
Hi,
it.
Pat.
Back in.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Usually only see you on Twitter.
I know. It's a good thing. It's all good things on Twitter, that's why. It's a good place to see, be seen.
Our strategic plan update, I did send that out. What we're going to do, which we have not done before, but at the mid-year review, we are going to send this out to the teachers, and then each building is going to make sure that they really touch base on everything that's in there to make sure that the teachers are included in these conversations. So that's going to happen later this week. They'll receive that from me, and then the principals will be having their staff meetings with them.
Okay, and then I just want to talk a second about the revised audited FY19 financial statements. After they were issued in December, there was an error in one of the reports, an expenditure report on the federal awards. And I worked with RSM, and those statements have been revised, and they were in your board packet. And we sent those out already to all agencies that needed those.
And we talked about that in December too. So.
Yes.
And then on to number 4, the school calendar. We do have 218s. It's officially been approved. And I know I touched base on what their winter break and what their spring break look like, as well as the different election dates that are coming up next year that we haven't always had. And just so you're aware, there is a law or a proposal in the legislature right now to make it mandatory that if a school is a polling place, that it would either be a teacher institute or a non-student attendance. I know that's what we followed here for safety reasons. There's those schools who do not do that, but that is a proposal in the legislature right now.
Do you think they'd make the proposal like not to have schools as polling places instead of wasting? Goodness
You would
gracious.
think, but that.
Well, we don't want to lose a
so,
day that adds it to the end.
Well-
But I thought it was already a law.
It is not, no.
I thought they
No.
did that years ago.
No, so we'll see what comes of it. So I know you've hopefully had a chance to kind of look at it from last week to this week. We just sent out a survey, which I had hoped to get out no later than Friday. We did decide to send it out also in an Arabic translation to hopefully get our parents who only speak Arabic to be able to fill that out. That went out at about 4:30 today. And that was school messenger that went to all parents in the district. So as soon as we get those results, I'll make sure that we share those with you. But just wanted to see if there was anything specific with this calendar that, as I put together a draft, I already have one done, and I do have another one that I'm starting to work on. But if you have any input, I would like to have that. And I guess I should share what the survey really asked. So it asked the school you attended, your grade level, and then it gave you some options for the week of Thanksgiving, because as you can see, 218 has Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, and this year was the first year that I'm aware of that we've had the entire week off as a district, and I know sometimes that can be,
No.
Yeah,
we've had it before? Okay,
It's probably been 2 or 3 years.
okay.
What, that we've had the full week off?
Conferences though, conferences were new, different.
Okay.
We placed this
On
year.
that Monday.
What week are you talking about?
The week of Thanksgiving,
No, they
which
had Monday.
would be,
For Thanksgiving week?
Not last year.
November, like on
This was a
218's
reason.
calendar, Mary, if you
Yeah.
flip to the next page, so they have the.
Yeah,
Wednesday,
this is the first year it was all
25th,
off, and the only
26th.
reason I know is because Bill has the whole week off, and he was pissed off that he didn't have at least one day without his children. And I know that. Yeah, I think they had like a 1:30, like it was goofy. They were a 1:30 leave on that Monday. This was the first time it was the full week off.
And the other question on there was really to ask about conferences and what time frame works for families. Because I know this past year we went to nighttime once and tried to have as many of those as possible. And we saw it, I think, over at Central and at Finley, the night times were really crowded.
That's what I was gonna say.
Over at Lawn, the second night was not that crowded. During the day was crowded. So trying to really gather that in and ask, what is it that you prefer? And trying to make a determination from there. So, and if you remember, once these drafts do come to the board, then teachers do have 2 weeks to review it and give their feedback, and then we'll bring it back to the board that final time. So, okay. Should I talk about printers?
Okay, we're a little tag team here today. Okay, we've talked about this a couple times now. Gino, myself, and Bill have been working with various vendors to renew, or to start rather, a new printer lease. And we have it narrowed down to 2 vendors that are in your board packets. And the major focuses that we've been looking at are reliability, meaning the speed of the printing, the size of the paper trays, and obviously the quality. Response time, downtime, we want to know how quickly these vendors can get here and get us up and running. The brand of equipment, you know, Gino and Bill can certainly attest more to, you know, what they like in terms of HP versus Konica Minolta, things like that. Customer service and compatibility with Google. From what I understand, a lot of the teachers now, they scan documents, and how we have to do it now, we scan it to our email and then we scan it. Where this is a one-step from the machine, it can go directly into our Google Drive, which I think is very popular among the teachers. And then obviously cost. So some things we've done so far is we've actually visited one of the vendors and took a look at their machines. We've obviously gotten the proposals. They sent a survey. Gino and Bill sent a survey to our teachers to see what they wanted. And what it really came down to is, of course, everybody wants more printers. That's never going to change, but they really just wanted reliable printing. And so where we're at now is, before we bring a final recommendation to the board in February, I really wanted to make sure that all of your questions were answered that we might have missed, and your concerns before next meeting.
How many printers do each building have currently?
Each building has roughly between 5 or 6 of them.
Yes,
Our structure in general for the building is going to be one multi-function color that's going to be at the front desks. Okay, so the building secretaries will have that. A building principal and an AP will also have their own private printer. And then there's one printer going to be remaining in all of the computer labs, because that's brand new with the smart labs. We'll have a maintenance lease on that, but we don't need to purchase that. And then each building will have 2 additional printers throughout the building. One is going to be color and one is going to be black and white, with the exception of Finley. Finley doesn't need an additional color. And then, of course, they still have their big Xerox machines.
Each building only has one?
That's a lot of the one big printer, I'm sorry, copier, yes.
One copier.
Yes.
So, I mean,
I'm sorry.
Oh,
it's a whole lot of printers.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't it be more economical to have 2 large copiers than?
Well, we've explored a couple of different options, and we could certainly go back there. What we kind of found is location is key too. The way the buildings are, we want to make sure all the teachers have access to them.
But, so, I mean, are teachers printing like a class set of things off of a printer instead of the copier?
Well, they shouldn't be, but sometimes they are. But what we want to do then is have a criteria. So let's say 25. Anything 25 pages or more, we're going to be able to route it directly to the copier, which the copier cost per unit is much less than a printer cost. So it's going to be, they're all going to be linked together.
But they couldn't just use the copy machines to have print release? That is that follow me system where, as opposed to having a bunch of little printers where you print it and then you go to the copy machine to make the copies, the copy machine itself is the printer and it just print releases it.
Yes.
And that's what they do now without the print release.
Kathy, how many printers would we be removing?
You know, I
district-wide?
did not focus on that. There's a handful, but, and Megan, feel free to speak up too. Because we have talked with the administrators about it, and even though we are removing a couple machines, the focus is really on reliable machines.
So what we're saying is we have a lot of printers right now,
Mhm.
a lot.
A lot of small
And
ones,
so-
is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
and so even in this proposal, that is cutting back, because they're all over the place.
And in one room, and I didn't really follow what we exactly have, but I know in one of the buildings I believe it's the teacher's lounge, they have a color printer and then next to it is a black and white. You know, so we're looking to just kind of condense it. And now keep in mind, one of the proposals from one of the vendors, they're Xerox machines. So these are bigger, heavyweight machines that even though they're technically a printer, they have more of a copier capability.
But each building's only having one of those.
No, two for the two for each building to share, plus the third one that will be up at the front desk.
And that was the call.
Yes, the column.
So right now,
With the
can I just
faxes.
ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Does each classroom teacher just have a PC in their room, like
A laptop,
They have a laptop?
yes, they have laptops.
So then, if they
yeah.
wanna print or whatever, how do they get to these individual printers? Is it all like through the air, or is it that they plug in?
No, it's all through the network.
It's all cloud
Yes,
printing,
it's all
okay.
through the network.
And they just click on whatever printer they wanna go to, and then they just grab their
Yes.
stuff? Okay.
Yeah. And from what I understand too, they're doing a print server, and they've been holding off on upgrading these print servers until we actually commit to that. So they're only going to have to do one. But maybe it'll be easier if we, let's just take Ridge Lawn. Okay, so Ridge Lawn would have one multicolor function in the front office. So the building secretaries can use that, and certainly anybody located at that part of the building might choose to use that. And the other two large pieces of equipment are going to be in different parts of the building. So theoretically, there's three larger printers that the staff can use.
And how many small ones?
And there's gonna be two in the principal's office, in the AP's office, and then one large printer, the Xerox machine. So four.
So they cannot make Xerox copy those on the printers you're referring to?
Correct. They would, if they wanna make copies, they would have to go to the big D95s that are out there.
And there's only one per building of the large ones?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so you've lost me. There's
Okay.
one large one, the principal and the assistant principal each have a small one.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's one other small one somewhere in the building?
Yeah, the one in the smart labs, when we
Oh,
start.
and that's it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are no other small printers for teacher use. Teachers can use the one in the office or the principal or whatever, but primarily it's the smart lab, the principal, the assistant principal,
They have smaller units.
and then one
Correct.
big one, and that's it?
No,
No,
two big
no.
ones.
No, one big copy machine, then two other printers, and one in the front office, right?
Let's forget about the principal and
Yeah.
AP. Okay, so the front desk has a large multifunction. So that one is printing and scanning and faxing, as well as copying.
Yeah.
Okay, so then throughout the building, then they're going to have two of those additional machines. So but one is going to be in color and one's gonna be in black and white.
Okay.
So each school would have, let's say, we kind of call them workhorses.
Okay,
They
so
would have
three workhorses.
three workhorses with the big copier as well.
And how many additional, one additional small copier with the three workhorses? How many
No.
additional small ones?
No.
Or just the three
No.
big ones?
Just the three big
Okay.
ones and
And a
the-
Xerox machine.
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
Okay.
And does, and I want your opinion here, does that sound like too much, not enough? I mean, especially, you know.
So
Because
they're
they're
talking
talking
about
about
we used to
we have
have-
a lot of copiers. To me, it doesn't sound like a lot of copiers. It sounds
It's a
like-
lot of
That's
copiers,
that's what we're
trust
going
me.
to now, but. we still
And
have
this is
more.
a downsize, but keep in mind, even though we're eliminating printers, these are much better printers, faster printers, better
Well, they're
quality
printers, but my concern is just the teacher part of me, is that if they're not allowed to do class sets on the printer, so to speak, if it's under 25, then it makes the one copy machine be at from, 7:45 to 8.
No, you just said there's
But
3
that's-
workhorses.
No, those are just printers.
Those are
Workhorse
printers,
printers,
one
though.
They're
copy.
not
Workhorse
copy
printers,
machines.
Okay, so wouldn't it be better to have like 2 or
Huge
3
copy machines.
ones that you can send from your computer to the copy machine?
And we certainly could, we could look into that option.
And I don't know, I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
feel like a copy machine, I don't know, like, I just, it seems more useful, but I guess it's just a matter of finding out what
One
this,
big one.
they have to say at the school, what's the needs, what's the use.
But what's the difference?
yeah.
Because the ones that are printers and a copier, they do both.
Yeah.
So why do you need something that's just a copier?
I mean, just a printer.
Well, I get the just a printer for the individual offices.
I think they're
all copiers.
Yeah. You can
also print it.
Yes.
But she's
Yeah.
saying there is a Xerox machine separate from the printer copier.
Xerox machines you can always send print jobs to.
Yeah,
like-
it just has to be set up.
Okay,
Yeah, so like our big copiers that we have one in each school, you can go and you can copy, but of course you can send your print jobs to.
oh, you can?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. I guess I just don't see the need then for 3
Little workhorses.
workhorses that aren't workhorses if you can't send 25 copies there.
And I would think, from what we're hearing from the teachers, is location. Because if I'm in a building and I'm on the north side and the machine's on the south side, it's just a little bit more inconvenient to get to. Which, if we gave them more littler machines, it might be more convenient to get to.
But
Well,
even
sure,
if-
but if they're limited to 25 and they need 28, then they're gonna send 20 and 8.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
No,
still
that, I
gonna
mean,
do
they're
it.
just gonna go around it, that's exactly what will happen.
We can
So
take
Miss
that
Megan,
one.
what is your thought on the?
So I will
Yeah.
speak up to say kind of what was brought up. The Xerox machine that we currently have, our gentleman has been out probably like 6 times in the last 5 days, and he has said he can tell the amount of usage
Right.
that we're trying to use it. The machine is not the right machine because we are putting so much on the Xerox machine, and that's kind of what was said. It's not, a lot of the machines we currently have are not meant for
Volume.
500 kids, 60 staff members, 7 hours of work.
So the
They're
volume-
meant for like your dentist office to like copy your ID. You know, and so like updating the machines I think will be a huge benefit to the staff. But again, that if we are talking about trying to mass produce, the one Xerox machine, it might be a good idea to look at going to large Xerox machines if it's an option and having one more efficient printer.
Yeah.
You know, the printing that we do, a lot of the elementary staff at Central, they're printing the color things out for games, manipulatives, little task cards for kids, visual schedules, things that need to be in color. But when they're doing a lot of copying at the printer. You know, they're sending small jobs to the color printers and to the printers, but they're mass producing, and that's where that Xerox machine might be helpful.
Do they break it down by price of how much more, like a Xerox would be than having 2 workhorse printers or?
Well, we could go out and ask them for that.
Yeah, and our
Yeah.
staff currently does not use the office color printer just because of the amount of jobs that the staff would be sending. It interferes with them. And so our staff have the one color printer copy. I don't think it needs to be the workhorse. If you're just sending a print job, you're just sending it doesn't need to copy. It doesn't need to fax, but I don't know what a workhorse requires. It just needs to print efficiently. And then the office staff would be the only ones that would need the printer, the copy, the fax machine. And the other 2 in the building or 3 in the building just need to be super efficient. And and fast and.
But what I hear what you're saying is kind of like what I was hitting on, that like having like a really quality workhorse printer, having 3 of those may not be the best option. That maybe just having 2 good Xerox machines located at different locations might work better, because they can send the one print job, like you said, you can send the print job there, and they can make the 25 copies. And I don't know, obviously I know Xerox machines are more expensive than the little ones, but if you're burning through ink on the little ones, because,
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, if I was a teacher and I had to walk a quarter of a mile, like, to go get 20 copies and I only had 10 minutes, I'm sending 20 and I'm sending 12, like, you know, I mean.
We know how much, what the volume is, because those things have printers, counters in them. So can we look at the especially like Megan was saying,
Of course.
we see what the volume is, and wanna make sure that whatever one we get is compatible to that volume, for that constant print.
Sure.
So it sounds like you've got, the best thing is to have that color, that big combo in the office that's just for the office. Then you got the ones for the principals, which you, an assistant principal. But then you'd probably want 1 extra color printer somewhere, and then 2 big Xerox machines that you can, if you're sending black and white, and you're gonna make the copy, just send it to the Xeroxer that does it all.
But I know they have counters in them. so-
And the good thing about the big machines, the big Xeroxes, is they are cheaper to operate.
Yeah.
So maybe by making
Splitting
that
them,
swap,
yeah.
yeah. So what I'll do, and this is great conversation, this is why we're having it, is what I will do is I will reach out to those 2 vendors now and ask them to send us proposals for that. Yeah.
And I'll just end by saying, this goes along with continued discussions with staff about what should be printed, and making sure that it is useful in the classroom, and that we're not just printing stuff to hand out, and making sure that we're always cognizant of that, so.
That was in the back of my mind, so yeah.
I find that, like, at least my kids who are at Central, they get a lot of worksheets that are from workbooks, not a ton of Xeroxes, but
From the consumer.
I think it depends on the teacher.
maybe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move on to board policies. A couple of them we definitely need to have some discussion.
Odd one on there.
A couple odd ones. The first one, accounting and audit, we just have to adjust a little bit to go with our current practice. So it's no, we wouldn't be changing anything that we do, just changing the wording on the policy. For board policy 530, this year a law did come out that you can no longer ask salary history when someone is applying for a job. There is some kind of wiggle room with that, that they are allowing, that the board could adopt an exception if it's a salary history that is public record. So really, if we were interviewing a teacher, we technically might be able to still ask that. And so they're giving the leeway for the board to say you can ask that, but they're putting a big caveat in there that you are opening yourself up to litigation right now because it still hasn't been decided. So earlier this year, we did take off all questions of salary. And again, if it's a teacher and
It's public record.
you just
look
spend
at
the 2 minutes going on to the previous website
Yes, it
that-
does stand,
and you find that out. And I do know that they put that in place because sometimes if you answer that and it's too high, people won't even bring someone in for an interview.
That's
at
true.
that
It also
time.
encourages employers to pay someone less than they otherwise would because
They
they
see
thought
that
you're
they
still
can.
getting more. The public policy behind it is actually quite brilliant and actually quite fair.
So my recommendation on that is that we do not take the exception, that we just continue to keep it off of our.
I think you should be consistent with all applicants, and if you are not asking one applicant a question, you shouldn't ask any of the applicants a question, especially considering the strong public policy in Illinois behind this type of amendments.
I agree.
Any,
You have a lot of women who are getting underpaid because they're telling employers how little they made before, and they're continuing to get underpaid. It's a problem, and I think this is to be applauded.
So that's why they did this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
and then under 5330, again, the big change would be like most of the policies we looked at last meeting, and that is really just the change in the language to reference the bargaining agreement now that we have 2. So we would need to make that change. And then we have the curriculum and content, and I just wanted to make you aware of 3 different changes in the curriculum, and then we do have to answer one question, and I'll explain why I think it's on there. So starting next school year, it will be required that we teach a semester of civics in either 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. And most of that's already kind of woven into our social studies curriculum. But that's law now. The other part is character education and bullying and harassment, and that has to be at all grade levels. And so that has already been taken care of. And then the big one that has been in the news a lot is studying the roles and contributions of the LGBT in the United States and in Illinois. Now, it's very interesting because with the semester of civics, I received a 2-page document on what the state is saying really you should be teaching for civics. Nothing like that has come out yet for the LGBT contributions. I am going to a seminar, an all-day seminar on March 5th to kind of hear what they're saying. But to really make any adjustments until we hear what the state of Illinois is recommending, to me right now would be kind of a waste of time. So I'm hoping that I will learn more at the March 5th. And as soon as I do hear anything, I will share that because I know some of you have come, that people in town have asked you questions about.
What do they have for civics?
For civics?
Well, just a ballpark of some of the stuff, I'm just curious.
Where did I put it? I just printed it off.
Most teachers should be teaching that.
Yeah. It really is just a discussion of current societal issues, which if you're a good social studies teacher, you're definitely doing. Your government institutions, which when you're taking the Constitution test, it fits there. Service learning, which I think is good, just talking about the importance of service to your community, and simulations of the democratic process. So those are really their 4 main topics. Again, all things that I think we're already covering, and we are going to be meeting as a social studies committee, not only to cover that, but that is our next curriculum kind of update that we have.
So now when it talks about a semester of civics, so do they want you to actually strategically say that there's a semester or there's just a semester
you just have to
within
have a semester?
That's what I mean. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily
A civics
Yes.
class.
And to get audited, you need to be able to prove that.
to prove that they've already
In
been
our
through
curriculum,
this.
that
Okay,
Yep.
that's what I was
They all should be
wondering.
doing that anyhow, so.
Yeah, and I think they are.
Can I ask, Adam, for the March 5th, what is that? Is it just a conference on this specific thing for the LGBT?
Yes, and it's up north, and they announced it about a month ago, and so because we haven't heard anything else other than the law came down, and they keep saying we're going to tell you what this means, and they really haven't shared anything.
So their roles in the US, but then it would also have to encompass the explanatory aspect of what those titles are, so then would it be counteracted with as part of health as well?
And it could, and that's what we're really, because right now, from what I've heard, it's mainly like their historical contributions, but to really understand that and why we'd even talk about it,
You have to talk about gender identity, sexual education, pansexuals. I mean, this goes into a huge spectrum
You gotta
of
be
different
careful,
things.
because this starts at kindergarten.
Well, it does.
Oh, I'm the
so-
runner of the GSA at Sandburg, so.
What does it stand for?
It's Gay Straight Alliance, but we changed our name to Saga, which is Sexuality and Gender Alliance Club. I've only been doing it for a few years, but so I think that's really interesting, just because even as a staff member, they'll say a term and I didn't know what pansexual was, and I didn't know, like all these different terminologies, so I feel like kids who are part of that community know it, but people who don't, and even my son, I bring him to events, and I have to sit and explain to him, well, this is what it is, and this, so I think it's a good integration. I'm just curious at what grade level.
And that's what I'm interested to see, is the state going to set the requirement at this, like they do, you have to have civics between 6th, 7th, and 8th, are they going to require certain things we talked about at different grade levels, or are they going to leave that up to the school district?
Well, do they even have talks about sexuality now, though?
As far as like in health class?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about, because these are things, I don't know when you go, if it's gonna be panel discussions or just gonna be unloading what it's about.
I just find it interesting that that's coming down, the whole fact that they have to be pointed out. Everybody should be studied for their contributions, whether they're gay, they're green, they're orange, they're blue, they're black, they're, crazy. Do you know what I mean? I mean, my daughter got the most amazing book from the library that was about women, and it was like women who made a difference in their community before age 18. And it was amazing. Cleopatra was in there. It was from all over. And I was just like, wow, who's that person? who's that person? It was very, very interesting. It was like, wow, you know what, that they had to make a book about that because people didn't realize. I just think that's
Well, maybe because the new laws, there was a new law just passed recently about gendered bathrooms and changing the labeling and things like that. So there's a lot of things going on with that and the idea of gender roles. So I mean, I'm curious to know about it too, just from a parent standpoint as well as an educator. And I know I have children in the district. I don't know when the appropriate time to, because if you're going to teach LGBTQT, you also have to explain what all those titles mean.
And I'm interested in having some answers because I do anticipate that we will have a lot of parents who want to come and talk about it, and I would like to have answers, and I haven't had anything up to this point.
But this was not the one that I found interesting. The next one was the one that I couldn't wait to hear about, the hunting.
Very quickly.
Yes.
So, in our district, do they not have a health class where they teach the boys and girls separate, like they used to back in the day?
They
The
still
period
do,
class,
yes.
I
The
used to
period
call it.
class. They have that.
Yes.
Annie was on the video.
This one with sex, there's one with sex too, that they do separately
Yes.
with
They
boys
do?
and girls.
Yeah. So
And what
When
grade
do
is
they
that?
start that?
I know it's in junior high,
Okay.
6th, 7th, 8th, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I said, as soon as I get any information about what it's looking like that they're
But
forming.
I feel like
will-
at junior high, this is an appropriate thing, you know,
Yeah.
I think definitely
So-
to discuss.
So now we have the most important question of the night. Does the board want to offer a course on hunting safety as part of its curriculum?
No.
And I do think that comes from our southern districts
Yeah,
where
yes.
hunting
Yeah.
is such ingrained in the community, and they had a big push to make sure that if they wanted to teach that, they could. So I don't think many places up here are going to teach that.
My son will love it, but no.
Yeah.
In some areas, I think it's very
Yeah.
appropriate, and we were talking, there's
Yeah.
some schools in southern Illinois, they get days off to go hunting.
Yep.
Well, there's some school that's agricultural areas, farming is part of it, so I
Yeah.
think it is dependent on the
That should
area,
be
yeah.
area concern, we don't need it here.
So in all
I
my
hope in
joking of
Crete
that
they
one, I
have-
do think our next one, we do need to just talk about, 7270 administering medicine to students. And it does allow students to self-administer medications when there is a plan in place. But then the question becomes, has the board adopted the school district supply of undesignated glucagon subsection? And what that really means is that schools have the ability to try to go out and get a prescription for glucagon, which my understanding is for people who have diabetes, and to store that themselves. So if the students do not have that, we could provide it for them. And at first I thought, oh, well, that makes sense, and that's why you dig deeper. So it's not even guaranteed that you would get a prescription, but once you put this in place, you are required to make sure that you always have something on hand. And it definitely does open the district to legal liabilities.
Right now, are they bringing in their own?
Right now, I don't believe we have anyone who keeps
But
it.
they
or-
have diabetes,
Yes,
so they have to
usually,
bring in their
yes,
own
usually they
insulin?
bring it, it's stored in the
Yeah.
nurse's office, and then they come in and take it.
Right.
So,
And the same thing with other meds too, they has to go to the office and distributed by the nurse, am I right?
this allows students to self-administer it if
So
they
on
have,
their own?
if they have, the nurse would usually be there.
Oh, that's-
Oh,
okay.
yeah, in front of the nurse.
But they can like give themselves it, and they have to have a plan in place, they can't
I
just
just
one
don't
day
want kids
say.
carrying medicine.
Yes, yeah, no, that would, it would still be in the nurse's
Yeah,
office. So, my recommendation on this is no, so that we don't open ourselves up. And that doesn't mean that if we ever have a student who just, they need it and they can't get it, or can't afford it, we can always go back and change that policy. But
There must be another way for that.
So,
Nope.
is this like to prevent a child who's got diabetes, who then has an issue with his blood sugar levels and perhaps forgot his medication at home? Is this what this
that
is
could,
addressing?
and if like you called the parents, you couldn't get a hold of them. So, but you would, basically, as soon as you would put this in, then you would need to have it on. Because
But how would it
if you said you had it,
If you know
and then
anything
you
about
don't,
diabetes,
then
there are
It
so many
depends on the
different
state.
types of medications.
Right,
as
there's
well.
so many different ones,
And
they
people
usually
who
have
are
their own
ins-
kit that
yes.
they bring to
People who
school.
are insulin
and you would
dependent,
store
you
their
cannot just give them
kits.
any.
Yeah, and that would be
Other-
maybe something, if there would be any policy, I would think as a district, that the policy would be of people who have special needs, whether it's, to be like, okay, just in case we don't have this, but we need to make sure that there is something that is up to date that You know, it's kind of like when you went to preschool and you had to make sure that you had a whole nother set of clothes that fit the kid,
Right.
and they would change it every 6 months so that if they like
Mhm.
crept through it all, you had it. You know, it's the same type of thing that you have to be.
I feel like in any,
parents.
I think that in any situation, administering a life-threatening drug, I think that if there was an issue, 911 would be the more appropriate
Yeah,
choice.
and they come
than-
quick.
I agree.
Yeah, and then administering this.
And we've had, I mean, I know when I was teaching here and at my other school, we've had kids that were diabetic and they would have to bring their kids.
Has any other
and-
school adopted that?
Not that I'm aware of, around, it just came out.
I guess the parents
so
or
not that I'm aware of.
whoever.
And like I said, I would feel comfortable now saying no, only knowing that you would
Kinda
have to do it
depending on the
immediately.
school district.
And then if
And
you see an
in a
issue, bring it
heartbeat.
back to the
Yeah.
table. So,
Yeah.
They need to be responsible.
We used
for
to
all
have
this
some
stuff.
parents say like, well, they didn't bring their inhaler to school or the parent never went and got the prescription to have it at school. Well, can't they just use someone else's? No. Yeah.
I just feel like there's so many varying types of diabetic.
Yeah, there's
concern,
different
Yeah.
Yeah.
insulins, there's different amounts.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
stuff.
So that's one we'll bring up one more time again when we go to vote on it. So if you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know so I can bring it to everybody so we can get that. And then our last one is 830, visitors to and conduct on school property. This really comes down to if we ban someone from all, like a parent, from all school activities, whether or not that includes board meetings. And what they're saying is you can ban them, but they recommend having 2 separate hearings because a board meeting is a whole separate public entity. So they are recommending, and I understand, to make sure you're not opening yourself up to a lawsuit, if you just have one hearing and ban them from everything, they're saying that they can come back and say, well, you can't ban me from this board meeting. I would hope that happens so infrequently, like every 10 to 15 years, that
Yeah,
just have a
I've
second
never-
hearing at that point and not open ourselves up to any liability. So my recommendation on that, and even after talking with the lawyers, is also no.
Didn't we have a parent that had to be?
I know a couple years ago when I was in charge of the conference, we did have a parent from this district who was banned from all conference activities, and I'm not sure
It
what the
wasn't that long
district did.
ago.
So it was only about 2 or 3 years ago.
And I think it was last year.
Yeah, I thought it was last year too.
It wasn't the entire year.
No, it was a certain amount of games or something.
Well,
I don't think I understand, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so if, basically if you have a parent who you are suspending from all activities, you can adopt a policy that would say that that would include board meetings.
What kind of activities
Why?
are you talking about? Why would?
He's
why
saying
have
he
to
would
advise
recommend
the
no.
parent?
I would recommend no, that you would have a separate hearing if you felt that it was gonna be a danger at a board meeting as well. Because to me, usually if you're banning someone, it's because you're trying to keep the students safe. Like
Right.
something happened that this person
Acted like a fool.
could not.
It says
be
if someone is banned from school events and board meetings, this would require school boards to have 2 separate hearings,
Mhm.
which
One
would
for
keep
the
the
banning them from
text as
activities and
written.
one to board them.
Yeah, and we can
You have
go
that
back to the,
I see what you're saying.
Which would keep the
Yeah.
text as written,
Mhm.
board meeting.
yeah, let me pull that up in my gigantic.
So even though that they're banned from maybe they were a total butthead at a volleyball game and were using profanity, they could be banned from the volleyball game, but he would still be able to come to the board
Oh, I
meetings.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
he's,
so
that's
he's
what-
not banned from.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
And
it's
if-
not
and
banned,
if you
but
wanted-
some of them are saying the
I
same
kept
thing.
rereading
Okay.
it
But
and I
they're
just
giving you the
wrap
option
my
to
brain
Yeah.
around
ban
it.
them completely.
Yeah.
No, they need
No,
to
that's
be,
fine.
that's 2 different pieces, I
Good.
think.
I totally agree,
Thank-
okay,
thank
I
you,
just, I
Teresa.
couldn't wrap my
I
brain
know.
around what.
yeah.
It's English, but not English
Thank you.
sometimes.
As a matter of fact, however, it was written when that one parent was banned, it was specific to sporting events.
Okay.
Because that parent was still allowed to go to
To-
graduation,
and parents
if
use
there were
conferences
things
or-
happening in
yeah.
the
It was just
classroom.
because got a little rambunctious.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Can I ask a goofy
Yes.
question?
Mhm.
It's kind of related but not related. If there are parents a parent of one of our students who is on the list, on the sexual predator list, how do we as a school handle those parents? Because obviously they have the right to with their child, they have the right with
They
their
have
child.
very few.
Very few, that's what I'm asking, like, what if you're,
Like, if-
I mean, obviously, they can't go to like a PTA function, they can't do other type of stuff, but
They
at the
can't
same.
even come to the building, can they?
Well, that's what I mean. I
that-
just wanted
that
an
all-
idea.
That is actually in our policy, that all has to go through the superintendent, they have to meet with me, if they wanna have a parent-teacher conference, like, we have to set those up separately. Everything goes through the superintendent.
Okay.
And, it's up to them to notify the school, and then the school notify the superintendent, or else they're in violation of
Of
what
their-
they're supposed to do.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise they.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I have not talked to anyone this year, but looking back on notes, I do know that we have had
Yeah.
that before, so.
I just wondered how we.
All right, so that brings us to our last item, which is our student resource officer, which we have kind of just brought up in past meetings that we were looking at this. And so hopefully what I gave you did a better job of describing it than we have had in the past. And just really understanding the role of a student resource officer in the community, as well as assisting the school districts and the impact schools hope that it would have on youth. And I did meet with Chief Pisnarski about 2-3 weeks ago to just really find out what kind of cost we would look at if this is something we decided to go. And it would be around $80,000 per year. They would have to hire a new person on staff. Most likely that would not be the resource officer. It would be someone who's a little more experienced, who would have to go through special training. And then I listed some of the specific duties on here that an SRO might perform, and then I attached the fact sheet from the community of policing services on there as well. So hopefully you had a chance to look at it so that we can kind of talk about this position if it's something we're interested in continuing to look at in our district.
Okay, because we're a unique district because we have grade schools as well as the junior high school. In general, in our general vicinity, how many other schools in our area have someone like this, and this plan that you have, what they are,
Yeah.
is that basically what they have?
So
there
if
is
you take a look at our conference or even our co-op, so like our
Okay.
conference has 10 or 9 school districts, 10 schools, and 2 of the school districts in there have an SRO currently. Worth has had one
Worth has
for the last 3 years, and their first 2 years it was on a grant. This is their first year they're actually having paid at $80,000.
Okay.
And then District 142 in Oak Forest,
Okay.
they have it a little bit different where they have 3 people who rotate it, so their costs are much lower. These are people who are off duty at the time and doing it on their off hours. And when I talked to the chief about that, he said with their lack of manpower, that would not be an option.
Okay.
So
Even on their days off?
he just said they'd have to call them in so much for overtime and everything. So.
There's a couple of them on your Fridays. Okay.
So has Worth seen anything especially positive? I mean, I'm just asking about people around here based on, you can say general, but like demographics and things like that, people who are similar to the, you know what I mean?
Or similar.
Yeah, they were similar.
I mean,
like,
some
what
of the
have they
duties
seen?
here, I just don't see that.
Like you were saying, you have one at a high school level, that's a
Yeah.
whole different kind of thing, you're talking about grown-up-ish.
Depending
Well,
on
no,
the
they
school
deal with
district,
much
but the
more
high school usually
grown-up
has
stuff.
multiple SROs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've had a chance to talk with a couple of their administrators to get a couple differing viewpoints, and I think it's important not just to talk to one.
Mhm.
And they definitely have seen the positive aspects of them working with the threat assessment team and just giving administrators different things to be looking at for safety. The one administrator I did talk to though said it was definitely worth it when we had a grant, like no questions asked.
Of course.
Yeah.
But now that we're paying the money, I don't know if it's worth that total.
When I saw the amount and I looked at the duties they did, I just don't know that they equated the atmosphere and needs in the school district that we have. Gangs and things like that. And maybe I'm out of the loop because I have little kids. I don't know what goes on in the junior high. I don't know how many instances we have of kids with drugs or vaping or whatever, or having to, one of the duties was writing police reports. I just don't know that it's
Yeah.
necessary to pay $80,000 for officer friendly, because that's what it seems like a lot of it is coming
I love
out
it.
to be. community, to make connections with, and I think it's great, because when I was young, we had DARE, and we had police officers who came in, and it made it not be like, oh, the cops, but like, these are our friends, and we felt comfortable going to them. I don't know if this is the same as this, and the 80,000 seems a lot for someone who I feel like it's just gonna, I don't know. And I know the threat assessment, but I wonder, could this money be better allocated to making the front entrance safer?
Yeah. Or getting a, like you're saying, to help with the threat assessment. I get it. You know what? There are special consultants out there too that I bet you we wouldn't spend $80,000 for them to be there. I don't know.
I don't know, just some thoughts.
For $80,000, I'd rather have a curriculum person.
You made that free.
You know, yeah, but I'm saying I'd rather
No,
throw
I know.
that into
I know.
to a curriculum director or something like
And
that.
it's hard to me because I'm so used to having actually 2 SROs.
Yeah.
I only had 9 classrooms, so, and I did 2 SROs, so.
You also
But it
had
was a
kids that were
different
like kicked out of
situation, and I
their
was
own
used to
home
having
school.
that.
though.
Yeah, that's what I'm just wondering, like the climate
So
and
I'm on the positive end, and I
Yeah.
actually did work with Mike Cozy, the officer at work, many times. I worked with that, and he would go to each of the schools, he worked with us also, knew our guys. And,
When I just wondered, when I saw this, that it was like a full-time position, $8,000, I thought it would be someone who might come in like on a consult basis and come in and whatever, and it wouldn't be this much. That it was a full-time officer who was in
Yeah,
all 3
it's
buildings,
a
and it
full-time
was.
officer.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I just thought it was someone that like you did kind of on lease from, I don't know,
Yeah.
I thought it was much less of a role and much less money, because again, I thought about what Elaine said last time, like, he's not really providing security if he's at one building at a time, he's one person. And I don't know if it's necessary, I just wonder, could the needs of having kids have a connection and a relationship with police in the area be fulfilled by the police, by coming to visit the schools, by doing programs, and I know that they do it, I mean, the
And that's
fire
what this
department's
guy
great,
does at work.
and that's not, but is that possible already within our community, as part of our community, as opposed to paying someone $80,000 as a separate role to kind of walk around?
And we do have our current liaison, Dave Mitchell, who I think does
Yeah.
a wonderful job.
Yeah.
He
Dave's
has
good.
positive connections, and he's
Yeah.
helped us with the threat assessment. I just wish we could have him more often. I wish that they could work that into the schedule at no additional cost to us.
Yeah.
But does that mean they can send more? That would definitely be a conversation.
I just don't know that we have all the needs that are listed on here, I'm just.
Chicago Ridge, I don't think, has the manpower, because Gelsky used to do it, Herman used to do it. You know, they're both commanders now, but years ago, they all were they were all. The kids, I just know from the past when we had Gelsky in the school, it was a good experience.
No, and I don't think it would be negative, I think that
But
the
he
kids
was only
would
here
love
2
it.
days a week.
But that's what I was wondering, like, as a full-time person, you know, every day, if it's not really like a security threat person, I don't think that there is this other need. And to be honest, the presentation kind of aspect of vaping and drug, like, that was another aspect of it. I feel like that is kind of done, I thought, by administration, you know?
And to be frankly honest, I mean, my only thing is, if you haven't, let's say there's a theoretical or hypothetical situation of drugs where you need to, you know, make an arrest, I don't think the school wants to be involved with that. Call Chicago Ridge, have an officer come over and do that, otherwise you're dealing with, you know, any type of liability.
Well, it's
with that
just
as
a
well.
liaison.
And
I
that's
feel like
what they do
911
now.
is the
If something
liaison. I
happens,
don't,
they
yeah,
call
you know.
someone, there you go.
You're gonna have an intergovernmental agreement, you're gonna have liability if he puts his hands on somebody, which even if he does everything completely right and everybody knows, I drink the police water, I represent police officers for a living, and I think they're fantastic. But there's so much liability.
Well, even at our school, our guys did not have arresting
And if you look
Yeah,
at,
abilities.
well, this would be a sworn officer, he would have arresting abilities. But even if you look at like the DOJs, the role that they indicate for an SRO is to educate students, develop community justice initiatives, and train students. I think that's all stuff we could do internally and not pay $80,000 for.
And again,
If there's
what's
a
their
threat-
idea of education? I mean, they're not educators. So are they gonna be able to, you know what I mean, reach out? Do you know what I'm saying? And that's the
Well,
other thing.
yeah. and I
It's a
think-
different kind of
and
education.
that to me is a concern when we would not be the ones hiring this person.
Yeah.
That would come from the police department, so you are really at their mercy of who they would provide for you.
There's there's a certificate that they have.
But
to
is
have
there
in
some
order
in
to do it.
between, you know, like does it have to be a full-time position? Is there something more than what Chicago Ridge Police Department is offering us?
Could we
There's
give,
a lot of-
officer
There's a lot of
friendly a
organizations that are
stipend?
willing to come in and speak to students or do
Yeah.
assemblies and
Could
stuff
we
like
give
that.
something
You
like
know,
that?
I
Like
think
that
that's,
to come in?
I mean,
Well, that's- yeah.
I
Yeah.
just strongly feel that if you're really talking about true threat assessments and true threat mitigation, you need 2 officers per building at least. So I just don't think this is actual, like, threat,
Yeah.
dealing with threat stuff. I'm not adverse to 2 officers per building if we can afford it, to be frankly honest.
I think
But
we need
that's
to
not
No,
secure
that's
the
go
fronts
with the
first.
curriculum
Agreed.
directory.
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
I
Instead of
agree.
Yeah, get that first and that'll be a big thing.
Totally agree, yeah.
Any other
So
thoughts?
is this then like a
And yeah,
dead issue?
I guess that would be my question. Is this something we want to continue to look at and bring to a vote, or is this something we should table for now?
So we have nobody now.
No, we do have a liaison from the.
Just Matt, yeah.
Dave?
But, and I don't
Sorry,
know,
David.
I'm not sure what he does exactly, what his role is. and
Yeah, so
What
Dave
he
is.
offers the students.
Yeah, Dave is our officer, again, working with all 3 schools for threat assessments. And if anytime there's something that we feel is a little more serious, that the students need to be talked to, we obviously let the parents know, but he comes in and talks with them. And if a threat was made, he met with some parents over at Lawn the other week with the principal and the child, and just said this is kind of the path that's happening right now, and we need to work past that, so.
So is that person here part-time, full-time?
Only as needed.
He works at the police, you know.
I mean, if you're looking for
He's
somebody.
the juvenile officer, so that's his job.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's his
Yeah.
regular job.
And then he comes over. I
He's
mean,
in
if worse comes to worse, you
trouble
find
or
some, I mean, if
anything's
you really
going
want
on.
him to do something more organized like DARE or something like that, is there a way to have a stipend or something, not $80,000 a year?
If I could add, he also comes into at least Lawn and Central and does like bike safety. Once springtime comes around, he does K-5
He does a number of things, yeah.
lessons. He does like safety lessons with upper grades with cyberbullying. He talks about drugs. He talks about with the younger kids like stranger danger. Has flyers, has videos, and he usually sets that up between now and summer. And comes and does those on a regular basis. He's also for us as an administrative team. Like I've texted him like, Dave, I don't know how to handle this situation, or I need a home visit, or so he's really accessible for us.
And I think
Too.
that's a lot of the stuff that the SRO does at Worth. He does a lot of that stuff. If I'm not
So let's-
mistaken.
So if it's already
Yeah.
part of his job, I don't know if this is a necessary expenditure, but
Well, we're a small community, so it is an expense for us,
Yeah.
Communities, usually have a little bit more to.
No, I
Yeah,
mean,
and
I
I
would
would
you
fruit
guys.
basket at Christmas.
well, I'm always willing, obviously we all want the safety of the schools
Yeah.
to be paramount but I don't know that this is gonna provide additional
Make it safer,
safety if
yeah.
it seems like the juvenile officer's already doing a bulk of what's going
Yeah.
on in here, so.
And we already have a rapport with him, and we already know that he works well with the staff and has worked well, as opposed to like you made a good point that I didn't even think about. They get to hire them, which means that we don't have any idea like if they have any kid rapport as much or whatever. I mean, they might have been an SRO at a place like Rise and have a different,
No, those guys get paid by the hour.
Well,
They're not full-time.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, if you have somebody who was that type, you know what I mean, in a different type of a facility, and we're talking about, pre-K through 8. We're not talking about like high schoolers or,
But there is
juvenile.
specific youth training that
Okay.
they all have to have. I think Matt has an actual degree of some kind. I think he has a master's or something.
So if we choose not to hire another person at that 80, along the same vein is, what are we doing like to secure the classrooms at this point?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the first thing we need to do is to look at our front entrances.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the
Yeah.
finance
That's a
and
big one.
facility. I mean, once we buzz someone in through those front doors,
Mm-hmm.
it's currently set up that they have access if they decide to bolt and take off. So we've talked, that was our number one priority in our finance and facility meeting. And
Yeah.
when we met with Pat, we said that has to be taken care of
Yeah.
immediately.
Right.
So-
Don't their teacher stores have to be locked?
Yes, I do.
That's
I
locked.
just think they need something more besides just a lock and a handle. Something else to be added to the door. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't, no.
Like a barrier thing.
Yeah, and just so from a life and safety standpoint,
Then the
there's very
police can't get
certain
in to
things-
help them, though.
There's
I know
very
that's one
certain
of the
legal
issues.
things that we are allowed to,
Well,
And then they
if a
can't escape if
perpetrator
it's-
gets in there first, then there
But
will
if you have
be-
something blocking
But
there,
if there's a
fire.
perpetrator in there and then they block it, that's the other
Yeah.
You
we
can push
are-
a desk or whatever, like a
Yeah.
teacher's desk over there, or, you know, in the case of a threat.
And if you have these things blocked, what happens if a fire happens? Now you have kids who are locked in there.
I totally agree with
Yeah.
you that like you can lock the door, but what if someone can get into it?
Yeah.
And the instructions that we have been given now is that as opposed to just locking the door, it is at teacher discretion. So if you think that there's an immediate threat and barricading your door is what to do, you push your desk in
Yep.
front of it, you do whatever you need to do.
It broke
They're-
things too.
Yeah, they judge it, so.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's gonna be a fire when there's a.
I'm just
You
saying,
never
I'm just saying,
Oh,
if you're
no, that's
making
one of
it
the ploys that
protocol.
they do,
Yeah.
they set the fire alarm off, they
Yeah.
do things to
Yeah.
get people to run out.
It's
Mhm.
not,
That's one of the
sometimes
ploys.
you
Well,
shelter in
okay,
places,
so
sometimes you
Maybe,
need a flight.
I think maybe that this is not an SRO discussion,
Yeah.
maybe this is
No,
maybe a
this is something
separate
else.
discussion we have with
Yeah.
a specialist who comes in and discusses it off record,
Yeah,
what our current situation is and maybe suggestions that they have, and we can do something like that with a special session off record, but I don't think this is SRO material,
No.
to be frank.
yeah, and maybe that's something, I don't know if we can pair that up with like, when
That
he
Saturday
comes into
morning.
that
I
Saturday
think that
morning,
this is
oh
the
I've
man.
got a
appropriate.
beautiful guy who can come in and talk, who's a specialist in this kind of stuff. I'm sure
Beautiful
we give
guy.
him a call.
Not
What?
beautiful, I mean,
I'm like,
fantastic.
Like, like
They get
fantastic
through
knows
a
his stuff.
threat scenario
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd be willing.
It's
to-
part of the, you have to by law.
and I think that's really important, because I would love to say if we did X, Y, and Z, our schools would be 100% safe, and I've said this to some of you before, I can't say that, I wish I could. But I also think that it's important to consistently be looking at what we have in place
Right.
and reevaluating that. And is this the best that we can do in our current situation? And what can we do to improve that? That also won't be taken away from the students coming to school.
Yeah, because if you see his thing, most of them feel that they're safe.
Yeah.
And the bad part about it is if sometimes if you put all this stuff on there, the kids will be like, oh, what is
But
going
now
on?
You have to mandatory train.
You know what I mean? The kids will freak out of like, I felt safe, and now we have like all these, we have, you know, police officers at every school, on every entrance, oh my gosh.
Well, the kids that are already here have been doing it every year. They have to do one
Yeah, one.
drill a year.
And the drill is what, no, I'm saying that the kids in general, they say they feel
Oh, they
safe.
haven't seen the
One day they come
visibility.
and now there are police officers and things. My daughter Annalisa would freak out and be like, what is going on? Why are people there?
My
Do you know what I mean?
kids-
She
My
would
kids
be-
might behave better, so.
But you know what I mean?
They're at the Boy Scouts are at the police station tonight. My son said, what? My husband's like, you get to see the jail.
Yeah, so if I just want to make sure I'm hearing the board correctly. Overall, it seems like we are going to table the SRO
Yeah.
discussion.
Yes.
But we still want to really take a look at what our safety is in the district and come up with a plan moving forward. So,
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
It does sound.
Okay.
okay.
Alrighty.
Okay, that's it. Can we close this out?
We're going to the closed session, right?
Nope,
Nope.
we're all done.
We just haven't, do we need
Go into
to
closed session at my house.
The only thing we have to do then is to,
Get a motion to
a
adjourn.
motion to end the meeting.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.